has been changed.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Hello guys, my name is Laras Diana. In this video, I will give you some video that really useful, especially for learn the language. The title is How to Learn Any Language in 6 Months by Chris Lonsdale. Okay, start begin. The people in the back, can you hear me clearly? Okay, good. Have you ever held a question in mind for so long that it becomes part of how you think? Maybe even part of who you are as a person? Well, I've had a question in my mind for many years, and that is, how can you speed up learning? Now, in this is an interesting question, because if you speed up learning, you can spend less time at school. And if you learn really fast, you probably wouldn't have to go to school at all. Now, when I was young, school was sort of okay, but I found quite often that school got in the way of learning. So I had this question in mind: how do you learn faster? And this is began when I was very young. When I was 11 years old, I wrote a letter to research in the Soviet Union asking about hypnopedia. This is sleeping learning, where you get a tape recorder, you put it beside your bed, and it turns on in the middle of the night when you are sleeping. And you are supposed to be learning from this. A good idea. Unfortunately, it doesn't work. But hypnopedia did open the doors to research in other areas. And we've had incredible discoveries about learning that began with that first question. I went on from there to become passionate about psychology. And I've been involved in psychology in many different ways. For the rest of my life, up until this point, in 1981, I took myself to China. And I decided I was going to be native level in Chinese inside 2 years. Now, you need to understand that in 1981, everybody thought Chinese was really difficult, and that a Westerner could study for 10 years or more and never really get very good at it. And I also went in a different idea, which was taking all of the conclusions from psychological research up to that point and applying them to the learning process. What was really cool was that in 6 months I was fluent in Mandarin Chinese. And I took a little bit longer to get up to native, but I looked around and I saw all of these people from different countries struggling terribly with Chinese. I saw Chinese people struggling terribly to learn English and other language. And so my question got refined down to, how can you help a normal adult learn a new language quickly, easily, and effectively? Now, this is really important question in today's world. We have massive challenge with environment. We have massive challenge with social dislocation, with wars, all sort of things going on, and if we can't communicate, we are really going to have difficulties solving these problems. So we need to be able to speak each other language. This is really important. The question then is, how do you do that? Well, it's actually really easy. You look around for people who can already do it. You look for a situation where it's already working, and then you identify the principles and apply them. It's called modeling, and I've been looking at language learning and modeling language learning for about 15 to 20 years now, and my conclusion, my observation from this is that any adult can learn a second language to fluency inside 6 months. Now when I say this, most people think I'm crazy. This is not possible, so let me remind everybody of the history of human progress. It's all about spending our limits. In 1950, everybody believed that running 1 mile in 4 minutes was impossible. And then Roger Bannister did it in 1956, and from there it got shorter and shorter. 100 years ago, everybody believed that heavy stuff doesn't fly, except it doesn't, and we all know this. How does heavy stuff fly? We reorganize the material using principles that we have learned from observing nature, birds in this case, and today we've gone even further. So you can fly a car. You can buy one of these for a couple, $100,000 US. We now have cars in the world that fly. And there's a different way to fly, which we've learned from squirrels. All you need to do is copy what a flying squirrel does. But build a suit called a wing suit, and off you go. You can fly like a squirrel. Now a lot of people, I wouldn't say everybody, but a lot of people think they can't draw. However, there are some key principles, 5 principles that you can apply to learning to draw, and you can actually learn to draw in 5 days. So if you draw like this, you learn this principle for 5 days and apply them, and after 5 days you can draw something like this. Now I know this is true because that was my first drawing, and after 5 days of applying this principle, that was what I was able to do. And I look at this and I went, whoa! So that's how I look when I am concentrating so intensely that my brain is exploding. So anybody can learn to draw in 5 days, and in the same way, with the same logic, anybody can learn a second language in 6 months. How? There are 5 principles and 7 actions. There are many, be a few more, but these are absolutely core. And before I get into those, I just want to talk about 2 myths. I want to dispel 2 myths. The first is that you need talent. Let me tell you about Zoe. Zoe came from Australia, went to Holland, was trying to learn Dutch, struggling extremely a great deal, and finally people were saying, "You're completely useless, you are not talented, give up, you're a waste of time." And she was very, very depressed. And then she came across these 5 principles. She moved to Brazil and she applied them, and in 6 months she was fluent in Portuguese. So talent doesn't matter. People also think that immersion in a new country is the way to learn a language. But look, around Hong Kong, look at the Westerners who've been here for 10 years who doesn't speak a word of Chinese. Look at all Chinese living in America, Britain, Australia, Canada, have been there 10, 20 years and they don't speak any English. Immersion first does not work. Why? Because a drowning man cannot learn to swim. When you don't speak a language, you are like a baby. And if you drop yourself into a context which is all adults talking about stuff over your head, you won't learn. So, what are the five principles that you need to pay attention to? First, the 4 words. Attention, meaning, relevance, and memorize. And that's incorrect in very, very important ways, especially when you are talking about learning. Come with me on a journey through a forest. You go on a walk through the forest and you see something like this. Little marks on a tree. Maybe you pay attention. Maybe you don't. You go another 50 meters and you see this. You should be paying attention. Another 50 meters. If you have not been paying attention, you see this. And at this point, you are paying attention. And you've just learned that this is important. It's relevant because it means this and anything is related, any information related to your survival. It's stuff that you are going to pay attention to and therefore you are going to remember it. If it's related to your personal goals, then you are going to pay attention to it. If it's relevant, you are going to remember it. So, first principle to learning a language, it focuses on language content that is relevant to you, which bring us to tools. And we master tools by using tools, and we learn tools the fastest when they are relevant to us. So let me share a story. A keyboard is a tool. Typing Chinese a certain way, there are methods for this. That's a tool. I had a colleague with many years ago who went to night school Thursday night, 2 hours each time practicing at home. She spent 9 months and she didn't learn to type Chinese. And one night we had a crisis. We had 48 hours to deliver a training manual in Chinese. And she got the job, and I can guarantee you in 48 hours she learned to type Chinese. Because it was relevant, it was meaningful, it was important. She was using a tool to create value. So, the second principle for learning a language is to use your language as a tool to communicate right from day one. As a kid does, when I first arrived in China, I didn't speak a word of Chinese. And on my second week, I got to take a train ride overnight. I spent 8 hours sitting in the dining car, talking to one of the guards on the train. He took an interest in me for some reason, and we just chat all night in Chinese. And he was drawing pictures and making movement with his hands and facial expression, and piece by piece by piece, I understood more and more. But what was really cool was two weeks later, when people were talking Chinese around me, I was understanding some of this. And I had not even made any effort to learn that. What had happened I'd absorb it that night on the train, which brings us to the third principle. When you first understand the message, then you will acquire the language unconsciously. And this is really well documented now. It's something called comprehensible input. There's 20 or 30 years of research on this. Stephen Krashen, a leader in the field, has published all sorts of these different studies, and this is just from one of them. The purple bars show the scores and different tests for language. The purple people were people who had learned by grammar and formal study. The green ones are the ones who learn by comprehensible input. So, comprehension works. Comprehension is key, and language learning is not about accumulating lots of knowledge. In many ways, it's about psychological meaning. A woman I know from Taiwan did great in English at school. She got A grades all the way through. Went through college, A grades, went to the US, and found she couldn't understand what people were saying. And people started asking her, "Are you deaf?" And she was English deaf. Because we have filters in our brain that filter the sound that we are familiar with, and they filter out the sounds of language that we are not. And if you cannot hear, you won't understand it. If you can understand it, you're not going to learn it. So you actually have to be able to hear the sounds, and there are ways to do that, but it's psychological training. Speaking text muscle, you've got 43 muscle in your face. You have to coordinate those in a way that you make sounds that other people will understand. If you ever done a new sport for a couple of days and you know how your body feels, hurts, if your face is hurting, you are doing it right. And the final principle is that psychological state. If you're sad, angry, worried, upset, you're not going to learn. Period. If you're happy, relaxed, in an alpha brain state, curious, you are going to learn really quickly. And very specifically, you need to be tolerant of ambiguity. If you are one of those people who needs to understand 100% every word you are hearing, you will go nuts, because you'll be incredibly upset all the time because you are not perfect. If you are comfortable with getting some, not getting some, just paying attention to what you do understand, you are going to be fine, relaxed, and you'll be learning quickly. So, based on those 5 principles, what are the 7 actions that you take? Number 1, listen a lot. I call it brain stalking. You put yourself in a context where you're hearing tons and tons and tons of a language, and it doesn't matter if you understand it or not. You're listening to the rhythms, to patterns that repeat. You're listening to this that stand out. Chinese, Paunazi, English. So, just soak your brain in this. The second action is that you get the meaning first, even before you get the words. You go, well, how do I do that? I don't know the words. Well, you understand what these different postures mean. Human communication is body language in many years. So much body language. From body language, you can understand a lot of communication. Therefore, you are understanding, you are acquiring through comprehensible input, and you can also use patterns that you already know. If you are a Chinese speaker of Mandarin and Cantonese and you go to Vietnam, you will understand 60% of what they say to you in daily conversation, because Vietnamese is about 30% Mandarin, 30% Chinese, and 30% Cantonese, not Chinese. The third action, start mixing. You probably have never thought of this, but if you got 10 verbs, 10 nouns, and 10 adjectives, you can say 1,000 different things. Language is a creative process. What do babies do? Okay, me, bed, now. Okay, that's how they communicated. So start mixing, get creative, have fun with it. It doesn't have to be perfect, it just has to work. And when you are doing this, you focus on the core. What does it mean? Well, and language is high frequency content. In English, 1,000 words covers 85% of anything you are ever going to say in daily communication. 3,000 words give you 98% of anything you're going to say in daily conversation. You got 3,000 words, you are speaking the language, the rest is icing on the cake. And when you are just beginning with a new language, start with your toolbox. Week number 1. In your new language, you say things like, how do you say that? I don't understand. Repeat that please. What does it mean? All in your target language. You are using it as a tool, making it useful to you. It's relevant to learn other things about the language. By week 2, you should be saying this like me, this, you, that, give, you know, heart, simple pronouns, simple nouns, simple verbs, simple adjectives, communicating like a baby. And by the 3rd or 4th week, you're getting into glue words, but therefore these are logical transforms that tie bits of a language together, allowing you to make more complex meaning. And that point you are talking, and when you are doing that, you should get yourself a language parent. If you look at how children and parents interact, you'll understand what this means. When a child is speaking, it will be using simple words, simple combination, sometimes quite strange, sometimes very strange pronunciation. Other people from outside the family don't understand it, but the parents do. And so the kid has a safe environment, gets confidence. The parents talk to the children with body language and with simple language they know the child understands. So you have a comprehensible input environment that's safe, where we know it works. Otherwise, none of you would speak your mother tongue. So you get yourself a language parent, who's somebody interested in you as a person, who will communicate with you essentially as an equal, but pay attention to help you understand the message. There are 4 rules of language parent. Spouses are not very good at this, okay? But the 4 rules are, first of all, they will work hard to understand what you mean, even when you are way off beat. Secondly, they will never correct your mistakes. Thirdly, they will feedback their understanding of what you are saying so that you can respond appropriately and get that feedback. And then they will use words that you know. The sixth thing you have to do is copy the face. You got to get the muscle working right, so you can sound in a way that people understand to you. There's a couple of things you do. One is that you hear how it feels and feel how it sounds, which means you have a feedback loop operating in your face. But ideally, if you can look at another speaker and just observe how they use their face. Let your unconscious mind absorb the rules. Then you are going to be able to pick it up. And if you can get another speaker to look at, you can use tools like this. Female voice. Sing song, king, stung, hung. Cheers, Chris Lonsdale. And the final idea here, the final action you need to take is something that I call direct connect. What does this mean? Well, most people learning a second language sort of take the mother tongue words and the target words and go over them again and again in their mind to try to remember them. Really inefficient. What you need to do this is release that. Everything you know is an image inside your mind. It's feelings. If you talk about fire, you can smell the smoke, you can hear the crackling, you can see the flames. So what you do is you go into that imagery and all of that memory, and you come out with another pathway. So I call it sandbox different path. You come out of that pathway and you build it over time, so you become more and more skilled at just connecting the new sounds to those images that you already have into the internal representation, and over time you even become naturally good at that process. That becomes unconscious. So there are five principles that you need to work with. 7 actions. If you do any of them, you are going to improve. And remember, these are things under your control as the learner. Do them all, and you're going to be fluent in a second language in 6 months. Thank you. Okay guys, that's all my story by Chris Lonsdale, and I'm sorry for mistakes. I think that's all. Thank you. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.